Imagine for a moment that you are hiking your way through the rugged backcountry and beyond in the Northwest Territories. There is no one around for many miles, and all around you, ominous mountain peaks rise up towards the sky, seeming like they are looming over you and really just kind of closing in. The gorge and valley open up in front of you, feeling like it's simultaneously drawing you in and telling you also to stay away. The rumors, the whispers, and the legends that you have heard about this place all felt a lot more ridiculous when you were back in civilization. They all seemed like nothing more than ghost stories and tall tales. But as every step makes you more conscious than the last that you are getting further away from help, they start to ring through your head again. After all, who in their right mind would set out to explore a place that has become known as the Valley of Headless Men? Somewhere that is the easiest to access by just flying in or by canoeing up the river. Somewhere where you are hundreds of miles away from civilization in every single direction. And somewhere that is filled with rumors, tales, and hints of all sorts of bizarre things. Lost tribes that may have had cannibalistic tendencies, alleged sightings of prehistoric creatures thought to be long extinct, and encounters with other things that defy all normal known biological convention. Some who state that the very reason this place is as strange as it seems is because it's actually the entrance to the Hollow Earth. And of course, the reason it earned its nickname. To have one body found with its head removed is probably bad enough, but to have several of them over the course of many years, well, that's something that you might want to pay attention to and might play on your mind just a little bit, especially as the night closes in and you start to think on just how far you are from help. So today we're looking at the Valley of Headless Men in general, but especially the story of the McLeod brothers and why they were the first men who met a grisly fate here and became at least the starter for the nickname that this strange place earned over the next decades. The Northwest Territories of Canada is home to Nahanni National Park, which is one of the largest national parks in the country, and despite being designated as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, it is one of the most remote and hard to access parts of the country. Although it is renowned for its natural beauty and spectacular scenery, the closest major settlements is Yellowknife, which is located more than about 300 miles away. It was given its UNESCO designation in 1978, but the area has been occupied by indigenous people for a long time prior to that. There have even been discoveries in the areas of the park, such as Johan Lake, that are thought to date back to prehistoric times. All around the area, there is history, intrigue, and more than anything else, a lot of mystery. With the official borders of the national park extended in 2009 to cover more than 11,600 square miles, or just over 30,000 square kilometers, the truth is that despite all the exploration and traveling that has taken place in the area over the years, there is simply too much of this rugged and remote terrain for it to be fully explored, unless everybody wants to hold hands and form a line and just start walking. So combined with this reluctance of the government to allow permission for exploration, you end up with a perfect storm of intrigue, rumor, and confirmed tales that add an air of mystery to just this whole region, which, given humanity and how we like our intrigue and mystery, it's no wonder that we would come up with something at some point that sounds horrific like the Valley of Headless Men. There is a gorge running through the region that is somewhere to be about 200 miles in length and has the main river flowing through it. This has served as a would-be highway for not only the indigenous tribes that occupy the region over the centuries and beyond, but also for travelers of the more modern era who have found that the simplest and most straightforward way to explore the region has been to access the source of this river by plane or parachute, and then just straight up sail down the river back towards the edge of the region. Despite the enormous size of the park, there were only 2 official landing zones approved within it, being Virginia Falls and Rabbit Kettle Lake, although in 2009 expansion added another 5 to that roster because people were going to do it anyways, so you might as well make it accessible. That being said, it is still far from trivial for adventurers to get permission to visit and explore the area because it is pretty dangerous. It is estimated that around 1,000 people visit the park every year and are usually expected to visit for about 24 hours or less. This was not always the case, however, and to start to understand this area and its stunning natural beauty, it would become shrouded in mystique. And we need to head back into history and learn a little about the story of the McLeod brothers and their ill-fated gold mining mission to really shed light on what I'm even talking about, which is why you're here, I hope. Willie and Frank McLeod were 2 brothers who traveled in 1904 to the valley in search of gold, just when it was called the Valley. Alongside their older brother, Charlie, they decided to make the long and arduous journey to this part of the land where they had heard that it was worth every bit of effort to reach. The McLeod brothers were based in Edmonton, Alberta, and were of Scottish and I believe it's Matisse heritage. Somebody's gonna say I said it wrong. I probably did. Anyway, so they set off towards the Nahanni Range in search of gold. Despite a crushingly cold winter, which is a horrible time to go to Canada to try to look for gold, they traveled to the Nahanni firstly by train and then ended up traveling by river via boat before completing the journey on foot. So they would travel to Vancouver by train and then onwards from there via boat, and after this they used the dog sleds to travel up Stikeine River, passing locations like Dease Lake and the Continental Divide. They arrived in a place on the Flat River that would later become known as Gold Creek, and according to the men themselves and the letters that they sent home to their families, they had a reasonably successful season. The story goes that they had great results initially and had built a boat to transport their new riches back home with them. However, the treacherous waters would overcome them and their vessel would be destroyed as they attempted to navigate what became known as the Cascade of 13 Steps. They returned to their homes with tales of gold to be had, although they were unable to bring much back at this time. They would then head back into the 1905 season, hoping to emulate their previous success. This time, the older brother Charlie stayed back home. The McLeod duo then traveled the same way and arrived safely. This time accompanied by a third man described as a Scottish engineer with the surname of either Ware or Wilkinson. Not really an ideal situation if you don't know who somebody is that's traveling with you, but they would send letters back home to let their family know that they had arrived safely and were making good progress, but these letters soon would dry up. Their families waited at home, but no news arrived. Although they must have feared the worst due to the distance that the brothers had traveled and the remote location where they were mining, it would be another 3 years before a search party was made and sent out to where they were last known to be. Led by Charlie with his previous knowledge of the area and assisted by authorities, the party would search high and low until they came across a truly grim discovery. Frank and Willie McLeod were found dead, both of them missing their heads. In some versions of the story, at least one of them was said to have been positioned as though he was searching for his rifle or knife to defend himself. The third man that had accompanied them was nowhere to be seen. The theories soon began to fly as word of the gruesome discovery made its way back to civilization. Had the two men been murdered by their companion in order to make off with the gold that they had already panned? Had he then disappeared into the back and beyond with all of their loot? Why their companion would have taken the time to decapitate them from a robbery was kind of a motive that is never really specified. Others suggested that perhaps the brothers had been killed by some sort of wild animal in the area and that it was scavengers that had picked the heads clean. Still others spoke of a mysterious tribe called the Naha that had lived in the region, ones with a reputation for brutality and whispers of cannibalism that may have taken the lives of the McLeod brothers. No definitive proof was ever offered, and it should be noted that at least one of the versions of the story had the brothers being identified by their hair, which would be truly an impressive feat if their heads had been removed, but the precedent had already been set and the nickname of the Valley of Headless Men had been established. In the modern day, a very succinct summary of this story is presented in a poem by one of the National Park's river guides, named Niles Asphalt, in the short work called The McLeod Brothers 3. The valley where their bodies were found became known as Dead Men Valley, later Valley of Headless Men, and the creek that ran alongside was Headless Creek. As well as these rather on-the-nose and specific references, there are other nods of the legend of the McLeod brothers and their unfortunate adventure in the area. While people still believe that somewhere around this particular point, there was still remnants or remains of the mine that the brothers were using, one that was clearly enough to kill over apparently. The search for the McLeod mine and the popularity of the story has also led to a location nearby that was previously named Sheep Creek being renamed to McLeod Creek. Maybe in an effort to have at least one part of the local geography that didn't specifically reference their gruesome deaths. Probably that. But as for gruesome and notorious deaths, for a region so remote and hard to reach, it feels strange to say that they would not be the last people that were found decapitated in the same region. The third man of the McLeod expedition is also considered by some to be a victim of the valley. While some theories point out that he was never found, implying that he took off with the loot and was living life away from the reaches of the law, others suggest that he too may have been lost to the forces unknown in the area and added to the list of victims. Even before Willie and Frank were found dead, there had already been at least one person who had vanished under similarly baffling circumstances. A hunting party was planned on traveling through the Nahanni Valley in the early 1900s when they were joined by a woman who went by the name Annie. According to the other members of the party, she went missing not long after they arrived in the area and then was never found. Members of the main tribe indigenous to the area, the Dean, would later state that the woman had been seen running on all fours fully naked up into the mountains and then was never seen again. In 1920, the valley would then claim another victim when a man named Martin Jorgensen made the journey and established himself, building a small cabin and beginning his own search for the gold in the area that was, said to be plentiful in the region. In a similar way to the McLeod brothers, initially all seemed well as he sent regular letters back to his loved ones, confirming that he was safe and getting on well, and even meeting with success in his gold-seeking endeavors. Once again, however, the letters would soon stop coming and the loved ones at home would become concerned. A search party would eventually be dispatched to check in on Martin, and they would find his cabin burned to the ground and his remains also badly burned, with the head once again removed. Similar and less fleshed out rumors emerged of another group that had set out to also seek gold in the same region in the same decade, who were met with a similar fate. They were all alleged to have been found burnt, tied to trees, and of course had their heads removed. As recently as 1945, there was yet another headless body discovered in the valley. This time it was a prospector that was found dead inside of his sleeping bag with, once again, his head removed. However, he was never named and no official explanation for who he was or how he lost his life was ever offered. Probably when he lost his head, it's like Scary Movie 3 style, they're powerless without their heads. I mean, dude, you kind of need those to... What do you mean they never gave an official... Okay, anyway, sorry, I'm getting off track. So with this many stories varying in detail and what amounts to a fairly serious and specific pattern of people losing their lives in this way in the valley, many would ask the question of what exactly was going on. What is the possible explanation for this to keep happening? A second question would have to be, is there anything else unusual that has been reported in the area? And the answer to that is a resounding yes. As well as its reputation for death and decapitation, the region has long been steeped in other rumors and legends. The main tribe indigenous to the area, known as the Dene, or slavery people, have been in and around this area for centuries and beyond. One of the persistent tales that these people tell is of a second tribe that they refer to as the Naha, ones that they describe as being bloodthirsty and even cannibalistic. They also spoke of white figures moving along the valley, even going so far as to warn a geologist named Frank Henderson in 1946 about them. Frank had been visiting the area after the disappearance of his partner, a man named John Patterson, who had failed to arrive at their meeting point but was awoken from his sleep by members of the tribe, speaking about these mysterious figures that they had spotted around the area. Whether this was the Naha or something else more supernatural is never quite specified. Henderson would later describe the area in the following way. There is absolutely no denying the sinister atmosphere of the whole valley. The weird, continual wailing of the wind is something I won't soon forget. Due to the lack of thorough exploration in the area, there are rumors that persist of various cryptids and creatures as yet unknown to science that some claim are in the area. Expeditions in the 60s and 70s discovered hundreds of caverns dotted around, with some containing prehistoric skeletal remains that dated back more than 2,000 years BC. This has led many to believe that this is a prime location for something unusual or supernatural to survive and thrive far away from the eyes of society and outside of the understanding of conventional science. There are also some even more outlandish suggestions, if you can believe it, people who suggest that the nature of the area and its unique layout are actually something more than just an area of natural beauty. They are, in fact, the entrance to Hollow Earth. You heard it here first. Whether that is the case or not, and exactly what the Hollow Earth theory entails, is something that is well beyond the scope of this video, but that really doesn't matter because I'm going to do it anyways because I love doing it live. So what is the Hollow Earth theory? Essentially, the Hollow Earth theory postulates that the inside of the Earth is actually hollow and that there are basically, I think they say that there's aliens down there and probably still dinosaurs. It's essentially kind of like how the Earth spins. That creates a centrifugal force that will press people against the wall. So if you find it and you dig down deep enough, eventually you'll be climbing up and then you can get into the Hollow Earth. Basically, I think at that point, the core would be their sun. Now, why do they say this exists? Why do people say the Earth is flat? That's gonna make somebody angry that watches this channel. The Earth is not flat. It's a frickin' sphere. Go to Antarctica. See the 24-hour sun. That's all I can say to you. I don't know why this happens on this channel, but people will find this specific channel and they will rage about the things that I say. Anyways, doesn't matter. So that's the Hollow Earth. Pretty fun idea. I don't know if I believe it, mainly because, well, I know I don't believe it. Essentially, the waters that come up from the ground, like every time okay, if you had a hollow Earth, right, and you have any level of volcanism, where's that coming from if you have a hollow Earth? That type of stuff doesn't make sense. So I don't believe it. If you want to believe it, hey man, that's on you. You live your best life. Anyways, just know that there's plenty of information available for any who have interest in this particular sort of suggestion. And if you want me to cover what the Hollow Earth is in the future, let me know. Just drop it down in the comments, say Roanoke, you suck. I want to hear about Hollow Earth, bro. Anyways, so you added legends and stories about humanoid creatures kind of skulking in the cave, suggestions that it would be an ideal location for Bigfoot to survive, or even some UFO sightings, and there is no story that begins to seem too supernatural or far-fetched for the Valley of Headless Men. So as always, the question we have to ask is, how plausible do we believe any of this to be? And the answer to that question must surely depend on exactly which part we are looking at. In terms of the McLeod brothers and their doomed second mission, while there are some discrepancies within the retellings of the story, it would seem absurd to have such a specific tale about two men found with their heads removed being a complete fabrication. Some might argue that with all the locations named after something to do with an initial death or beheading, that people have just kind of leaned into these stories, but it would seem very unlikely that there was not at least some element of truth to it. As to the questions of how exactly the brothers met their brutal end, there are a number of reasonable possibilities. The third man that accompanied them was never found, so to many people, it's the most straightforward and easy answer to the question. They were just straight up betrayed by their companion. At some point, presumably after the trio had found enough gold to make it worthwhile, he attacked the sleeping brothers and killed them both in their sleep before taking off to parts unknown with enough gold to set him up for the rest of his life, and he was never heard from again. The removal of the heads in this situation would seem excessive to some, but it could be easily an extreme act of barbaric nonsense by a desperate man who wanted to be absolutely sure that his terrible crime that he was committing would not be reported. Also, something to note is when you decompose, your head is not that well attached. Like, animals can carry that off. Like, it's basically just a couple of vertebrae, and even then, that's held together by ligaments and tendons and a little bit of muscle. So once all that kind of decomposes away, your head literally falls off. But there's also the possibility that they all fell victim to attackers and the third guy was just never found. Perhaps others had heard of their success that they had met and they wanted to gain access to some of the gold that they had also mined. Is it possible that they were set upon by a rival group of prospectors, or even the ruthless Naha people? While many of the local tribe leaders spoke of the white-faced demons that hunted the region and spoke of a great evil that lurked in the valley, is there a possibility that this was just a reference to the Naha? That they didn't disappear after all, only retreated into hidden caverns, scattered around, and continued their violent raids. A similar question has to be asked about the other men that would later be found beheaded in the region, and the suggestions have to really be the same. The most likely explanation for their fate that befell Martin Jorgensen is that he was attacked by persons unknown. He was certainly not shy about the success that his venture had brought him, and it would have made him somewhat of a target to any that knew about the gold that he had accumulated. The fact that his cabin was burned to the ground would also indicate this was a malicious attack. However, the person or peoples responsible have never been found. And in the case of the man found beheaded in a sleeping bag, even less information is available. There is always the chance that some of these men met their ends at the hand of wild animals, whether known by science or not, but there is something about the removal of the heads that seems to imply the intervention of other people. As to the other paranormal and supernatural suggestions surrounding the region, all that we can say for certain is that there is no concrete evidence to confirm any of the theories that have been thrown about over the years. While there is certainly some truth to the fact that there are doubtless areas of the region that remain unexplored even today, many that have visited reported that if there was ever going to be a place where these sort of fanciful tales would seem plausible, this could be the place. So there you have it, the Valley of Headless Men, the McLeod brothers' doomed mining expedition, and the smattering of other snippets from one of the most mysterious and intriguing areas that we have looked at so far. So what do you make of it all? Is there any truth to the suggestions that there might well be something lurking out there deep in the valley that is preying on unsuspecting people? How likely is it that there are creatures as of yet unknown to science lurking in the hundreds of caverns and skulking away from the human eyes? Is there any chance that this is truly the entrance to Hollow Earth? And do you think the Naha people disappeared, or did they just stop being spotted, at least by the people who lived to tell the tales? Well, as I'm actually going to add something new here to these Roanoke Tales videos, we're going to speculate for a moment because I like speculating and I think it's kind of a fun addition, so join me if you will. So here we have, first off, you need to understand nature in and of itself, and then you need to understand human nature. Human nature, whenever there's money involved, people turn. for the best way to say it. Like, people get violent over money because you're talking about livelihoods, you're talking about people possibly being desperate, and then if you are espousing that you are making all this money, people will come after you. That's a certifiable fact, and that's why if ever you come into money, you really don't want to be in that situation. You don't want to be flaunting your wealth. You just want to be an average person living your average life and then just go from there. But the big thing is, when you have prospectors in an area where there's no law, there's no help, there's no oversight, you literally have to be in a situation where you are ready to go at any point. You have to have people watching your back, you have to watch other people's back, you have to be locked and loaded brides of Christ, because you just never know if you're going to run across another person. And probably one of the biggest things about, like, let's say it wasn't animals taking heads, how do you prevent somebody from being identified? You take their head. Like, that's pretty much what you're supposed to do. That's pretty morbid, but like, no dinner records weren't really a big thing back then. But like, how people look, if you remove, like, most of your bodies are all gonna look the same unless you have like identifiable tattoos or you've got some like weird injury or just something, but the face is pretty much how you're going to identify somebody. So if you take that away, then you pretty much prevent anybody from figuring out who they are unless they directly knew them. So if you have just random prospectors that you're robbing, you take the heads of them, you throw them off a cliff or something like that to get rid of the evidence, and then you just go about your day. Nobody's going to really know where to look, especially during this time frame. They're not going to know where to even begin the search, or if this is somebody that maybe you didn't even know or nobody knew, it's just going to be like, oh, well, I guess they're just gone. I don't know who this is. So that's kind of the whole point. I think it's either an animal that took the head or it's somebody very clearly covering their tracks. This to me doesn't really scream of Hollow Earth or anything concerning, you know, this whole concept as far as like, oh, it's supernatural. Like, there's nothing supernatural about beheading somebody. It's just a barbaric act. And unfortunately, humans are still very violent. Like, we're a violent species, and it's gonna take a while, like, for us to not be this way. So it just is what it is on that front. But either way, that's just my thinking on the matter. I hope you guys did enjoy. I want you to join me for the next one, which is coming out soon. If you did enjoy, then please leave a like, as it helps get the video out there. And subscribing also is a great way to stay up to date when I post. Remember, if we can get this channel by 2027 to 1 million subscribers, which I don't know if that's gonna happen, but it'd be cool if it does, then I will go hunt the Michigan Dogman in June of 2027 in the northwest quadrant of Michigan. And I'm actually, like, no lie, I'm kind of building a team. I've got a few guys already, so that's gonna be cool. But I want to thank the people who have supported this channel from the drop and even supported it when I was gone for like 3 months. At the literal Wendigo tier, we have Grayson, Wes, Monkey Man, and Stupid Fox. Thank you guys for your awesome support. At the Eyewitness to the Event tier, we have Beaver Malaga and Dragon Master Knight. Thank you guys. At the first-hand accounts, we have Pimp Daddy Shamrock and Yeeps. And at the second-hand accounts, we have Bianca, Fred Rush, and Troy. And to the rest of my patrons, I do appreciate y'all's support as well. It goes a long way towards helping out, and it's definitely appreciated. So thank you guys. I hope everyone enjoyed, and I will see y'all in the next one.